Hello and welcome to session 264 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing our approach to alignment research by Jan Leike, John Schulman and Jeffrey Wu. These three people, Jan Leike, John Schulman and Jeffrey Wu, are working at OpenAI. And when they talk about our approach to AI alignment, then it's not 100% clear whether they are speaking like for themselves or if they're speaking for the company itself. I would probably assume that they are speaking for the entire OpenAI. So it's published in August, and 4 months later there was a post on Less Wrong by Eliezer Yudkowsky called A Challenge for AGI Organizations and a Challenge for Readers that highlighted some features about this post. And actually we will start with Miri's very short comments on this before we go into the actual article. So Miri's is called A Challenge for AGI Organizations and a Challenge for Readers. And it's written by Eliezer Yudkowsky mainly, but also with Rob Bensinger editing and Nate Suarez for input. And it's actually not that much of a challenge and almost an accusation against the other AGI organizations. This is kind of similar to a challenge that Miri also had about corrigibility that we looked into, I think 3-4 months ago or something like that. Which we didn't participate in, but this video, this presentation is in fact meant as an entry into this challenge. You may recall the last time for that challenge about who could write most about corrigibility, I judged that Miri won, but not overwhelmingly so. And for this particular challenge, I predicted on Facebook a couple of weeks ago that I think this one would go basically the same way. But we'll see when Miri hopefully posts their entry in the not too distant future. So, the challenge for DeepMind and Anthropic, the other AGI organizations. In theory, of course, there are more AGI organizations, but I think Eliezer Yudkowsky has mostly given up on those and considered them beyond any kind of help, redemption. So, we have OpenAI's plan. That is the document we are going to read today. And obviously, Eliezer Yudkowsky disagrees with this plan, but he is really much in favor of releasing the plan, so people can discuss it. Both because it's really important that there is a plan when you're doing something different, even though no plan survives contact with the enemy, and also it's important that the plan is public. And the key problem, of course, is that OpenAI has a plan, but DeepMind and Anthropic has not made any kind of plan public, and most likely that is because no such plan exists. And so this is a challenge to these two organizations: come up with a plan. And as far as I can tell, over the past month, DeepMind and Anthropic have not made any kind of response to this at all. Not a yes, not a no, not any thoughts about a plan, just basically totally nothing. And that's of course somewhat disheartening. Also, they haven't reached out to Anthropic and DeepMind for whether the plan exists. They believe probably some people in the organization have thought a bit about this, but it's probably a good idea to make a plan sooner rather than later. There is here on Manifold Markets a bet on what is the probability that one of these will actually produce some kind of plan before the 1st of March, and there is now a 48% probability that this will happen, according to the Manifold Market. So why do we want a plan? What's the point of a plan? Well, once you make a plan, you have a single canonical place where you put all your assumptions, and it's a very easy place to, if you want to know if it's a good plan, then you can go into the plan and analyze it, see for inconsistencies or other kind of problems. When things update, when you learn new things, you can update the plan. And in particular, if you're trying to do something really difficult, like building AGI and making it not kill everyone, then plans are really, really important. I think I obviously agree with Eliezer Yudkowsky that what these organizations are doing is very difficult. But I think one of the key reasons they may not have made these plans is that they in fact believe that the problem is easy. Like if you believe there's plenty of time and you can make unlimited retries and you can count on the goodwill of all other actors and things like that, then maybe a plan is not so important. Like it's only if you're trying to do something difficult. Another big advantage of plans is that the field can debate it, and the field can like compare different plans, and in theory, hopefully, the researchers could decide to go with the organization that has a better plan. That seems like a reasonable. You also want to probably avoid some part of the plan, making those public. Like if you make the plan completely public, then some of it may be very relevant to your competitors, other people trying to build unaligned AGI. You probably also will need a branching plan if you're uncertain about the future. That's also a very likely thing to happen. But I think that is not a plan, is to just build an AGI and then after you've built the AI, then try to do a lot of work to make it safe. And the exact problem with that, I disagree actually that it's not a plan. I think it's a plan, it's just a horrible plan. And the reason why it's a horrible plan is that if you have an organization that is capable of building an AGI and realizing that the AGI you are building is unaligned and could potentially be very dangerous, then almost by definition you are an organization that is not very safety conscious, that does not have some kind of security mindset. And that means that you are very unlikely to just get that suddenly at this point, even if your plan calls for it. So there is a similar parallel challenge for the readers. Well, not quite a similar challenge, but that is to look at OpenAI's plan, and just like Miri is writing up their thoughts on it, then we should write our own thoughts, preferably first, so that they are unanchored on what Miri is writing, and of course focus on what is most decision relevant. And the hope is that the criticism that Miri is going to come up with, that we can preempt that and to see whether this kind of criticism can happen without Miri, and of course in some way try to make Miri superfluous, because Miri is an organization that is existing much less these days than it has been previous. Also, with this unanchoring, it's a bit complex precisely what that means. One of the things Eliezer Yudkowsky explicitly asks is, please tell us, please make it clear if you're repeating something you've heard from a Miri person at a gathering or something like that. So I have a hard time figuring out precisely how to obey that requirement, because obviously something that Miri has said or published at some point, I can't get around that, because they have pioneered the field, and for a lot of things they're just the key reference. You can't talk about corrigibility without talking about Miri. I think even if there is a 100% success rate, and when Eliezer Yudkowsky eventually writes up his criticism of OpenAI's plan, he says nothing except what I've said in this presentation. I don't think you can conclude that Miri is superfluous, for the simple reason that a lot of the things that I'm saying is built on research that Miri has been doing. So when I interpret the like in this, then I think like it's something like, if two people are chatting, then that doesn't really matter if it's online at a gathering or at a gathering. It's more like if it's one-to-one or one-to-many, as how I would interpret this. And also one thing I should say about how unanchored I am is that after Eliezer Yudkowsky published this, then a number of people wrote up some criticism of of OpenAI's plan. I did not read those, and Jan Leike, he wrote some kind of answer to this criticism, and I didn't read that either. So I'm very unanchored, and that may just be an excuse for being very lazy. But I haven't. There's a good chance I am saying something today that Jan Leike has in fact answered already. So one example of a place where I'm in doubt about whether I'm fulfilling this is I met Elias Yudkowsky in San Francisco in July for EA Global, and I was describing some of my plans to him, and some of the other people who were there, I'm not entirely sure who they were, made some objections. I think it's an interesting objection. I think it's too general and doesn't really relate to what I'm doing, but that would be kind of example of ways where some of my criticism is something that I've gotten directly from Miri in that way. Right. So let's go through the article, Our Approach to Alignment Research by OpenAI. And first, also, I would like to say that there have, in fact, been a previous iteration on this process. And that was when OpenAI was founded. They had a plan to put an AGI on every desk, like really openness in all their capability research. And that was a public plan, and it got a lot of criticism, and they changed. OpenAI changed very much to not be public about their capability work. And I think that's a beautiful example of this kind of process working really well. And that's why I have substantial hope that this process can also cause some kind of improvement to the epistemics of OpenAI. Right. So the introduction of the plan has a goal, and that is to make AI aligned with human values and follow human intent. I think it's a decent goal. I think it should be more precise and comprehensive and all these kind of things. And it's not precisely corrigibility. If I were to write this kind of goal, then corrigibility would be written in very large letters on the second line. There would be one goal on top of that, but corrigibility would be on the second line. And I think if you try to build AI aligned with human values and following human intent, but not corrigible, then the things that are not corrigible, like making the AI change its mind and how it use itself and this kind of thing, I think those are in fact substantial problems for their plans. Their approach is empirical and iterative, and they want to study how AI alignment techniques scale and how they break. I like that they say how this will break, and I think it's really important to have this understanding that the techniques they're using are preliminary. We do in fact have a substantial idea about where they break. They break up when we have distributional shifts, and that's one of the things that I would have liked them to explicitly point out, because we do in fact know more than what they're letting on here. And they're both looking at current and expected alignment problems and try to push current alignment ideas as far as possible, and believe in fact that the current ideas are quite robust. We can get very far with them. We can substantially advance alignment research using the ideas we already have. So again, the framing is a bit off here in that they say we will advance towards solving the problem instead of solving the problem. A good plan should end up with the problem being solved, but this is just quibbling of words. So I talked a bit earlier about how OpenAI used to be completely open, and now they are like open-ish, so how about their openness-ishness? They have the overall idea that AGI could be really dangerous, and it's possible that it will require everyone to work together, and that obviously seems like it will require quite a bit of openness. They don't have any like criteria for like how will we know how much it will require and how will we get everybody on board. That seems like a tall order. But the key thing they want here is to have openness in alignment research, but only when it's safe to do so. And there could be a number of reasons why it would not be safe. And they want also to be transparent about how well their alignment techniques work in practice. So that's a good question. Like they write in their plan that they want to be open about this, but then they release ChatGPT 3, this ChatGPT, which clearly has some issues, and so the obvious question is, how well did their alignment work? And they haven't written about that. And I think a good reason why they are saying this is that it's not safe. Because if they describe all the techniques, all the prompts they're using, then the people on Twitter and 4chan are going to look into that for different holes and attacks based on that. And that means that their plan already now could be facing into a problem that could be much more prevalent in the future, that they cannot in fact be open about it. Another sentence they have is, we want every AGI developer to use the world's best alignment techniques. And like, depending on how many AGI developers you are envisioning, that mostly to me sounds like they're imagining a lot of AGI developers. Like, and in that case, probably we are very doomed if there are so many that OpenAI can't just write discreetly to all of them. Let me see, why can't I get this? Won't this go away? Hold on. So there are three pillars of the approach. The first pillar is to train AI systems using human feedback. The second is to train AI systems to assist human evaluation. And the third is to train AI systems to do alignment research. And we'll go through these three in a moment. But first I want to highlight that three pillars isn't really a good metaphor, because it's not like they're working on all three of these at the same time. It's more, you can imagine some kind of rich line plot with starting to work mostly on training AI systems using human feedback, and then transitioning to mostly training AI systems to assist human evaluation, and then transitioning to mostly doing having these systems do alignment research. And when you look at that this way, then it seems like the plan is missing some kind of timing and criteria. Like, when do we go from mostly focusing on phase 1 to go to phase 2, and when to phase 3? And okay, let's talk about the first one, training AI systems using human feedback. So, like, this is reinforcement learning from human feedback. Yeah, okay. So here is some prompts we have in the data, and there's a sentence X that says that a dog is, and then you have some kind of initial language model that says a dog is a furry mammal, and then you compute this new policy, and then you find a reward for this, and then you use some kind of reinforcement learning, for instance proximal policy optimization, to tune this language model, and then for instance, then you get to like a dog is man's best friend, and then you use that for two things, both for continuing with this Kuhn-Lieberman shift, but also to have a model of the rewards that you can use for going forward. This is the technique that is primarily being used in OpenAI. And they think this is working quite well. They have found a lot of low-hanging fruits, and this can inspire all others in the industry and raise user expectations for how aligned AIs should be, and gives a rich feedback loop which enables their empirical and iterative work. But this is not enough. It's not fully aligned. Sometimes it doesn't follow instructions, sometimes it's not truthful, sometimes it's supposed to refuse harmful tasks, but it doesn't generally do that. And sometimes you can make it say like biased or racist things and things like that. Here I would object, and object perhaps quite strenuously, that this is in fact not alignment. In particular the first, if it fails to follow instructions, that is not an alignment failure. Like, if you ask the AI, please tell me what the 34th President of the United States was, and it says that is George Bush, then that is not a failure of alignment, that's a failure of capability. And to a large extent, I feel the others here are also failures of capability rather than alignment. The hope for OpenAI is that this reinforcement learning from human feedback will be some kind of building block for scalable alignment. And it could be, but it seems to me to be some kind of I call it a foundation of sand, in the sense that we are not really pointing the AI at actual dogs. We are pointing AI at representations that are eminently hijackable, and I think this means that in the limit of very strong AI, this is going to fail catastrophically. The second pillar was training models to assist human evaluation. And that's obvious, as the models become more capable, it becomes just plainly harder for humans to evaluate whether what the AI is saying is correct. And we also get pathologies like the AI telling people what they want to hear. And the key way to get around this that are being used right now in OpenAI is recursive reward modeling. They're also using some other things. But here you can see, like, this is a very classic reinforcement learning setup where you have an agent and an environment that gives observation and takes actions, and then you have a reward model as well. This is and a user giving feedback. This is kind of like standard reinforcement learning with a reward model, and then the idea here is, like, the recursive part of recursive reward modeling is that then you repeat the process but flips it to the right 90 degrees so that the human takes the place of the environment. And then you get like a new reward model, and then you repeat the process again, turning right every time. And that's where the recursiveness of recursive reward modeling comes in. And one of the things they really want to have this recursive reward modeling do is to figure out, is the model being misleading or deceptive? And they believe that the best way to do this is to actually make AI assistants work in practice. Make AI assistant evaluations work in practice. I notice here that a problem with our plan is that there is no direct link between these two things, in that I believe that recursive reward modeling will in fact not help very much with deceptive alignment. Okay, the third pillar is training AI systems to do alignment research. And of course we expect to encounter new alignment problems, and we don't think we have an infinitely scalable solution at the current level. So what we need to do is to build an alignment AI and then have that do alignment research. I think this plan is dangerous, potentially very dangerous, in what has sometimes been called that a task is AGI complete. In that if you can do AGI research, then probably you can do everything with a small star, and certainly do enough things to be dangerous. And the hope from OpenAI is that the AI will gradually take over the alignment research, while humans of course stay in the loop all the time. And they make a specific claim that evaluating alignment research is easier than producing it, especially when provided with evaluation assistance. And I don't think this is obvious at all. Where it's probably true when you have something that is like not explicitly deceptive, but if the research is being done by someone who is potentially deceptive, then I think evaluating whether that is the case is in fact really, really hard. So, alignment research from large language models, which are of course the key models being used. They make the claim that narrow AI is sufficient for alignment research. And I think that's really quite a claim. Of course, narrow AI and general AI is some kind of spectrum. And if you define a narrow AI as and perfect AGI that can do everything except one thing, then sure, you can call that a narrow AI. But on the general conceptualization of what is a narrow AI, I think the fact claiming that it can do alignment research is a really, really tall order, and I think that is a claim that probably will not stand up to scrutiny. Another reason to be optimistic about this is that out of the box large language models are not in fact agents. And that is true, of course, but they are almost agents. You can make them simulate agents with like a simple prompt. So all the mechanics are there, and I don't think that makes them a lot safer. It is stated that they don't need internet access to do alignment research. They can just, from nothing, figure things out, figure out what the problems are, and make some kind of progress. I think that is extremely optimistic. Like, perhaps Eliezer Yudkowsky could just from nothing realize that there is a problem and make real progress on this. I don't think anyone else could do that. I don't think anyone like Eliezer Yudkowsky also had an amount of input. And this idea of having the AI in a box without internet access almost certainly does not work. We know too many problems with that. And again, once they have a model that's useful for alignment research, they plan to make it accessible. And there's this quote here that I'm a bit unsure what means. While we don't know when our models will be capable enough to meaningfully contribute to alignment research, we think it's important to get started ahead of time. So what does get started ahead of time means? Like, before they can do something, then we need to have them work on it. By definition, that doesn't sound so. Like, hopefully what they mean is not that they will start to do all the dangerous things first and then get started with that before the AI can actually contribute to solving the alignment problem. That seems like the wrong way. I don't think that's actually what Jan means, but I'm unsure precisely what he means with this sentence. The plan has some limitations, and OpenAI are acknowledging that it probably needs to be adapted. When AI becomes stronger, we will need to adapt the plan in some way, and I think that's a good feature of most plans. And it's also under-emphasizing how much robustness and interpretability will mean for our odds of success. The AI as evaluation assistance is potentially problematic in that it can amplify problems in assistance. We could see discontinuities of different kinds, either in technology or in time, from our current models to AGI. It's possible that getting this training signal right isn't actually the hard part of alignment. An example would be inner misalignment that could be problematic. But it's and it's possible that the least capable AI that's capable of doing alignment research is capable enough to be dangerous. That's my general expectations. It's stated here with this came out of order. The hardest part of the alignment problem may not be the training signal, but even if that is the case, then the training signal will still be required. So, what do I think about this section? I was a bit curious in the sense that limitations is not the word I would use. Like, if it turns out, in fact, that there are discontinuities, then that is something we need to have some kind of plan for faster takeoffs. And like, if the least capable alignment researcher AI is general enough to be dangerous, then we need to do something about that. Like, I don't really want to leave this as holes, and I think more work should be done. Clearly, if you have a plan with some holes, then I think it's a very obvious thing to say, okay, we need to actually work more here and make version 2.0 of our plan, and have a plan that just looks like it might actually work. So those were my summary of OpenAI's plan, interspersed with some minor comments. Now I want to focus on my primary comments and concerns about this plan. The first is that it's framed as an approach and not a plan. An approach is a lot more vague than a plan. When you are doing something that is really, really important, in this case OpenAI is saying this may destroy the entire world, then I think it is worthwhile to spend some extra time to actually formalize it enough to become a plan. And I think that is actually really important. And if this was a plan, then the obvious thing people would say is, like, there are a lot of known desiderata for a plan, how plans should look, and you would evaluate it up against that. And when I look at, like, what do I expect from a plan, one thing that really, really stands out as a reason why this is not a plan is that the objectives are extremely unclear and unquantified and like described in extremely small details with very little details. And I think that is, like, if you have a plan, then naturally you would think, okay, you need to actually consider what are the objectives in fact. Another thing that when I look at the plan, you could argue that it's a 3-step plan. And 3-step plans, like 3 steps is not that many, but in fact I'll later argue that this doesn't in fact solve the entire problem. We'll need more steps. Once you start getting into 5-step plans or something like that, then my inner Malloy starts to like twitch. Like 5-step plans are often not going to work in practice. Another thing, if you have a multi-step plan, is you should think about what happens if step 1 and 2 succeeds and step 3 fails. Because I think you could make a good argument that step 1 and step 2 in fact makes our situation worse if step 3 fails. So if you make the world worse in step 1 of your plan and make the world even worse in step 2 of your plan, and then in step 3 of your plans, hopefully you can like undo some of the damage you've caused in step 1 and step 2. I think this is it might still be a good plan, even though you have to do bad things first, but I think it's something you need to acknowledge and something you need to take steps to avoid and deal with. Also, most plans have some kind of timing and criteria, and I think this is something that I would like to know, and I think OpenAI right now does not know at which stage do they really throw all their effort into trying to automate alignment research. No one knows, and I think they don't really have a plan, and I think it's problematic because like it wouldn't be really nice if they did step 1 and 2 and kind of forgot about step 3. My second large complaint is that we are in fact not solving the entire problem, because what this plan outlines is something I would call a small solution to the alignment problem. And having a small solution to the alignment problem is in fact not sufficient for everyone to not die. And the problem with this kind of small solution is that we are likely to have some kind of alignment tax, that all this interoperability and robustness work is not going to come for free. And that means that solutions that are unaligned will be cheaper, be more competitive, and like even if OpenAI makes an AGI that doesn't destroy the world, well then Meta is going to destroy the world 6 months later, right? That doesn't really solve the problem. I think being charitable is written kind of between the lines that it will still work if the alignment tags turn out to be strongly negative. That this robustness and interoperability work is just so wonderful, and the recursive reward modeling is so wonderful that you want to do it even though it costs money to do that, more money to do that than to not do it. And that's of course a thing that can happen, but I think there's a good case to be made that the alignment tax will in fact not be strongly negative. Like most things don't come for free. So that creates the problem. How do we get everybody to adopt the solutions that OpenAI creates? Not just because it's more expensive and will be less competitive. There are people who are very skeptical, and there are people like, how do you get the Chinese government and the United States government to cooperate on this? That is indeed a substantial problem. So one of the things that have been suggested that this plan critically does not contain is a pivotal act, and that is something that OpenAI may be able to do. They may plan to do it, but most likely, like the plan simply does not mention this, and so the plan does in fact not solve the problem. A third is perhaps more controversial, and I'm not entirely sure that this is completely charitable, but I want to mention it anyway. So, Microsoft is a major partner and investor in OpenAI. And Microsoft is a company that throughout its history has had a very questionable business strategy called Embrace, Extend, and Extinguish, which is to embrace some kind of new conceptual framework or standards or things like that, and then extend it with some other things that aren't strictly required, but creates a lot of mess and uncertainty about it, and speaks to Microsoft's advantages. So everybody that are using this standard have to use Microsoft's implementation of that and use that to eventually extinguish the standard. And this is in fact not a conspiracy theory about how Microsoft operates. That seems to be their modus operandi. And and it's been quite well documented that this is how they work. And I feel some kind of analogy with this, with their approach to alignment research, even though it's not a precise analogy. So the first phase is to embrace alignment work, and OpenAI has done that, and they are at least certainly having lip service to paying lip service to the thoughts of alignment, and they are co-opting it in that sense. The next part is extending. So that is the part where they say actually alignment is not really this about AI killing everybody, but well, it's also that, but then it's also some other thing. It's being extended with being about biases, being about censorship, being about that the AI doesn't follow your instructions, and being about all these kind of other things that are really peripheral, and where perhaps OpenAI has some kind of advantage. Like I would in fact go so far to say that value alignment is also a part of this, even though that's more controversial. So I basically see a very, very large part of this alignment work as not real alignment work and just some kind of extension. And the problem, of course, is that this is an extension that where OpenAI has a real competitive advantage, right? They have a huge proprietary lead on this, and the thing I really worry about is that the discourse will be changed from being about not killing everybody and then changing the discourse to be about biases and AIs, whether they are leftist or rightist and this kind of thing. One of the examples of how I believe that OpenAI is trying to leverage their advantage is that they have in fact a lot of human feedback that they are sitting on, and that is, if they were just saying this is just for alignment purposes, then they could publish that, but they're not publishing that. They are trying to use that to get some kind of advantage in the field of AGI. I think extinguish is not probably really the best way. This analogy doesn't really work 100%, but I think it's dangerous, and it's pointing towards one of my key issues with this document. The last part is unfortunately one I call OpenAI incompetence, because I see the problem of building aligned AI as really, really difficult. And I think that the alignment work that OpenAI has produced so far is far from up to scratch. That doesn't really mean that it's worse than what other organizations are doing. It's in some sense, in some of it is even better than what others are doing. But reality doesn't grade on a curve, right? It's you don't solve the problem by being better than the others. You solve it by being better than the problem in some sense. That's also something. I think I've got this sentence from Ivan Hubinger, but I think it's rather common sense. But that's also something I should flag as something I've heard from someone from Miri. So I think AI alignment in general is a really hard problem, and I think OpenAI underestimate the difficulty. And if I would try to analyze how difficult it is, then Miri has published a 6-dimension of operational adequacy, which is an attempt to describe how this problem should be solved, and that's how I would evaluate it. And I think this plan need to have to be extended to some way to have a pathway towards fulfilling these requirements. An example of where I feel OpenAI is displaying somewhat scary incompetence is with ChatGPT that was just released. And I think when it was released, I think there was, I obviously can't prove this, I don't have the internal documents at OpenAI, but it looks to me like they were very surprised about the capabilities of the model. I think in a very strong sense, OpenAI has absolutely no clue what's going on inside ChatGPT. An example is, it feels like Jan Leike or OpenAI has told ChatGPT, if someone asks you to speak Danish, then tell them you can't, and try to teach the model that, and then the model will say in perfect Danish, sorry, beklager, jeg taler ikke dansk, meaning that in fact OpenAI seemed like they were surprised by the capabilities and the kind of alignment that was the alignment that they did seemed to just plainly not work. Another issue is that the management from OpenAI seems to not really be on board on trying to do AI safely. Like this quote from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, scares me somewhat. Like he used to be annoyed at being the villain of EAs until I met their heroes, and now I'm low-key proud of it. And I mean, the heroes of EA, that's Norman Borlaug and the Russians who didn't launch the missiles mostly. So I don't think actually if you are proud of being a villain, then that is really bad, and I don't think that speaks well to the moral character of the organization. That is all for today. Thank you and see you next week.